Hey guys, this is Chris from Deus Ex Machina. This started off as a very long video. I decided to break it up and talk about why I write, the process of how I write, and hopefully give advice to people, not necessarily how to write because your writing style is your own, but if you're suffering from some of the similar conditions that I suffer from, ways that you can try to work around that to try to become a functional writer. But this is more or less a window into my writing style, such that it is, as I've often said, I don't think I'm as good a writer as some people think I am, but it shows you the process. So let's go into it. There are some people who don't like that. They want that breakup. They don't want to see a banter. And I was always remembering a novel called Vox, which was controversial, came out many, many years ago. And the entire thing was a conversation between a man and a woman. And there was no quotes. There was no he said, she said. It was just the dialogue fired out. And I always admired his choice for doing that. And I found there was a brilliant decision, but there was some controversy, not necessarily in the writing style per se, but in what was being said. It was a very graphic story. But I loved that idea, and I love analyzing the works of Aaron Sorkin, so I do watch his stuff religiously. I try to imagine his style, his mental state, and how he writes, and I try to convey that. But in order to do that correctly, I have to try to keep up with my hyperactive mind, and that means writing things in note form, just the dialogue. But that means, as you might have figured out, that I put more value in my dialogue than my descriptions. And that's true. I do value my dialogue more than my descriptions, because I can say, this world is shaped like a giant donut. Everyone's inside. I can convey what that is, but I'm not going to spend 10 pages explaining the physical geography of a torus world. I can just say, this world is the Earth that's basically been turned inside out and splayed across inside a giant donut. There is the inner column is not part of the world, and it's a giant machine that keeps everything under control, and everyone lives on the rest of this convex. And I can say there's mountains, there's hills, there's rivers, there's lakes, there's cities, and being the size of the Earth, the landmass is insanely huge. And I can say that, and you go, okay, I know exactly what it looks like. And I can have the visual when some person exits this train and they see that there's no horizon, that the world is bending up over them, and they can see their destination 100 miles away because the landscape is curved up rather than down, and they can see their destination. But there's an atmosphere, but the clouds is a cylindrical like tunnel that goes through the center of the torus, and that prevents you from being able to look through the torus to the opposite side. So you can't look straight through unless it's on a clear day, and you can. Where the stars you see at night are the fires and the lights of the cities on the opposite side. Stuff like that is just, but the thing is, I can explain that within a minute, and then I'll never mention it again. I'll say it in passing, but I'll never go into 3 or 4 pages explaining that world again. I explained it. Let's move on. Let's talk about this cool train. I explained the character's main train in the Taurus part of the story as being a red and gold bullet-shaped car body. And that's it. I can go into huge details on the angle, the curvature, the way it's rounded. But if I say it's a red and gold bullet-shaped car body, and I say it that quickly, and you go, oh, I have an idea. And some people will picture something else in their head. But I go, you know what? You're still picturing 90% of what I'm trying to convey. Let's move on, right? It's like when you're explaining what the Enterprise looks like for the first time, right? You can say it's a flying saucer and a cigar that's been connected through an umbilical, and these 2 other umbilicals have these big long cylinders, which are the warp nacelles. And some people will picture something else, but eventually, you'll get an idea. And that's how I do things. I don't go into huge details on what people are doing. In an action scene, I generally will, because I love action. And so there's action scenes in Affinity where I will go into details. But because I know that there are some authors that can't stand action, so they generally will skip past that action. I mean, that was one thing that was famous, I think, in the first book of Game of Thrones. There's very few long-winded action scenes. In fact, we skip over some of the biggest action sequences in the book. And I generally won't do that. I will dive into the action if I feel it's necessary. So that's basically how I write. I'm very, very heavy on dialogue. I'm very light on descriptions. And when my ADHD is really bad, I will focus heavily on just getting the dialogue out and then returning to it later. And then when I'm reading through the dialogue, if the dialogue isn't broken by a lot of descriptive dialogue, I can see the dialogue and see if it's flowing. If I have a paragraph between what one person says and how the other person responds, then I will sometimes not understand the flow of that dialogue. And I know that because I've had actors read out my screenplays, and there'll be a narrator talking in between saying what's actually happening. And when we do a pass, some of the actors were like, can we not do the narration? This actually happened. Can we not do the narration? Let's just run the dialogue, and then we can get our timing and our vocalizations correct. And I absolutely was for that. I said, let's do a run, just dialogue, ignore the description, and just have the characters talking. And you got to feel so much more. I got to see so much more. I went in there and changed some other bits and pieces because it flows so much more. And so sometimes when I'm writing dialogue, I don't want you to be broken up by he said, she said, or and then he looked longingly into the sky and then he saw the stars. And by the way, those stars were a wonderful piece. There's this star, and this star. And I'm like, no, I want this moment to be. I don't want to be distracted. Conversation. He said, she said, run the dialogue and go on from there. And if someone's saying about, do you say he interrupted, she groaned, he muttered? I used to do that when I was young. I don't do that anymore. So you'll probably see that with stuff like Amethyst, but Affinity kind of moves past it. Although I was including it, and I've kind of gone back and forced myself to change things. When people talk about novels, do you write it once and then out the door? Nope. I write it, and it's probably horrible. I'll go over it again through grammar. I'll go over it with spell. I'll do a spell checker. I'm very much a beast of technology, and I don't think it's wrong to say I'm a product of the technology. I've been using grammar and spell checkers since I was using Professional Write on my 8086 back in the late 80s. I have no problems using grammar programs, but I don't rely on them. I look at what they're suggesting and say, you know what? No, what I'm saying is better. But I do rely on technology, and sometimes I have written something and realized I've contradicted myself, have to go back and change things and really, you know what, I don't want that previous instance to be worded that way. I'll go back 150 pages and I'll rewrite that section. And a lot of people will say, of course you do it that way. But then you take about someone like Harlan Ellison, who goes to a shop, a bookstore, store window, sits down with a typewriter, types out a piece of paper, glues it, tapes it to the outside, to the inside window, and then works on the next page, and he can't go back. I cannot believe how ballsy that is, how courageous that is as a writer to do something like that. I am incapable of doing it. My ADHD means I'm generally typing faster than my capacity to understand even what I'm saying, so I will generally have word salad. I will say the wrong word. I will spell something incorrectly, and sometimes I say, screw it. I'm going to fire it out very quickly. I will go back to it later, and I'll fix the grammar. And so generally, I would never let someone watch me write because it gets very embarrassing because they'll say, you spelled that wrong. That sentence is incorrect. You've said that twice. You've repeated yourself. And I'm like, I know that. I am literally firing out the idea as quickly as possible. I'm going to go back there and I'm going to fix that. And I'm going to go over with the grammar checker. And then I'm going to go back through it again. And I'll probably narrate it out loud. I've actually had a situation where I've actually had a text recognition system and I think Adobe Acrobat has this, where a computerized voice will read out, and I've actually gone and listened to my novel through that and go, yeah, that doesn't sound right. When you get that other voice hearing it, and the same thing when I had people read out one of my scripts and go, okay, no, this is good, this doesn't work, this works. And I have no problem going in and going, okay, this is not working. Let's going to change this line here, this line, and this line. And I changed, I'd say, at least 4 or 5 minutes out of my last screenplay based purely on what I was hearing the actors say. Anyway, this has been Chris from Deus Ex Machina, and I'll see you guys next time. Like and subscribe. Peace.